From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I cannot awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life was drawn from every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. O outcast of all outcasts, most abandoned, to the earth art thou not forever dead? To its honors, to its flowers, to its golden aspirations, and a cloud, dense, dismal, and limitless, does it not float eternally between thy hopes and heaven? For the most wild, yet most homely narrative which I am about to relate, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, especially in a case where my very senses doubt their own evidence. But mad am I not, and very surely do I not dream. Of course, I shall not pretend to consider it any matter for wonder that my extraordinary life and mysterious death have excited discussion. It would have been a miracle had it not, especially under the circumstances. Through the desire of all parties concerned to keep the affair from the public, at least for the present, or until we had further opportunities for investigation. Through our endeavors to effect this, a garbled or exaggerated account made its way into society and became the source of many unpleasant misrepresentations, and very naturally of a great deal of disbelief. It is now rendered necessary that I give the facts, insofar as I comprehend them myself. They are succinctly these. Oh, horror upon horror. The ice opened suddenly, and we are spinning within the borders of a gigantic amphitheater, the summit of whose walls is lost in the darkness. But little time will be left me to ponder upon my destiny. We're plunging madly within the grasp of the whirlpool, in a bit of roaring and shrieking and bellowing of ocean and of tempest. The ship is quivering, oh God, and going down. Hence, the blissful ignorance of mesmeric revelation ended, and the nightmares of the world came flooding in. I was born. I was the offspring of actors in the theater, hence my flair for drama. My mother, Elizabeth Arnold Hopkins Poe, was the darling of the American stage. celebrated throughout the States as well as numerous portions of continental Europe, adored for her beautiful singing voice. She was known as the Nightingale. My father, David Poe Jr., was also an actor. And we need say nothing further about that. He disappeared before I reached the age of 1. Tragically, I would witness my mother's death as the result of tuberculosis before I was 3. The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal. The redness and the horror of blood. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleeding at the pores with disillusion. The scarlet stains upon the body, and especially upon the face of the victim, were the pest ban which shut him out from the aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men. Lo, 'tis a gala night, within the lonesome latter years. An angel throng, bewinged, bedight in veils, and drown in tears, sit in a theatre to see a play of hopes and fears. While the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres, mimes in the form of God on high mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly, mere puppets they, who come and go, at bidding of vast formless things that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping from out their condor wings, invisible woe. That motley drama, oh be sure it shall not be forgot, with its phantom chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that ever returneth in to the self-same spot, and much of madness, and more of sin, and horror, the soul of the plot. But see, amid the mimic rout, a crawling sheep intrude, a blood-red thing that writhes from out the scenic solitude. It writhes, with mortal pangs, the mimes become its food, and seraph sob at vermin fangs, in human gore imbued. Out of the light, out all, and over each quivering form, the curtain, a funeral pall, whoosh, comes down with the rush of a storm, while the angels, all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy Man, and its hero, the conqueror worm. There are certain themes of which the interest is all-absorbing, but which are too entirely horrible for the purposes of legitimate fiction. Case in point, my foster father, John Allan. In the beginning, a loving and nurturing guardian, but this would change as I came of age. He became a harsh and stern taskmaster, to say the least. A Scotsman for all seasons. And yet, my dear foster mother, Frances Allan, would serve as the foil to his constant threats to turn me adrift. I dare say Mr. Allan was also a gifted hypocrite, as were most of my fellow men throughout my lifetime. Just when I most needed aid and sympathy from them, they turned upon me, leaving me stranded in the mire, lonely, desperate. But women do not argue logically as to one's merits or demerits. They follow certain heart instincts, sometimes more profound than the deductions of philosophy. And God eternally blessed them. They led me away from ruin, while men stood aloof and mocked. I spent my most productive years while I was living in Philadelphia, working at the Saturday Philadelphia Courier. It was during that period that I wrote this little piece, which I should like to share with you now. The most remarkable feature in this publication is the bad paper on which it is printed, and the typographical ingenuity with which the author has managed to spread the contents of one volume across the pages of two. Thus ends the tale of the present times, and thus ends the most inestimable piece of balderdash with which the common sense of the good people of America was ever so openly or so villainously insulted. We do not mean to say that there is positively nothing in Mr. Fay's novel to commend, but there is indeed very little. We have a blistering detail, a blistering truth, a blistering story, and a blistering brand, to say nothing else of innumerable other blisters interspersed throughout the book. If ever we saw as silly a thing, may we be blistered. And thus, I began my living in the literary world in as lavish, as glamorous, and as auspicious a manner as one can possibly fathom, earning a wage as a critic. Man's life is happy, chiefly because he is ever expecting that it soon will be so. He is ever seeking and ever believing in his own perfectibility. I have no faith in human perfectibility. I believe that human exertion will have no appreciable effect upon humanity. Man is now only more active, not more wise nor more happy than he was 6,000 years ago. And yet, man continues to seek perfectibility and craves the means by which to attain it. He is always believing that his life will be happy. For my own part, I can only think of one time, one period in my life where I experienced true happiness. She whom I loved in youth, and of whom I now calmly and distinctly relate these remembrances, was the sole daughter of the only sister of my mother, long departed. We had always dwelled together beneath the tropical sun in the valley of the many-colored grass. No unguided footstep ever came upon that vale, for it lay away up among a range of giant hills that hung beetling round about it, shutting out the sunlight from its sweetest recesses. No path was trodden in its vicinity, and to reach our happy home, there was need of putting back with force the foliage of many thousands of forest trees, and of crushing to death the glories of many millions of fragrant flowers. Thus it was that we lived all alone, knowing nothing of the world without the valley. I and my cousin and her mother. Much, very much has been said of me. Even more has been imagined. Men have called me mad, the question is not yet settled whether madness is or is not the loftiest intelligence. Whether all that is glorious, all that is profound, does not spring from disease of thought, from moods of mind exalted at the expense of the general intellect. Then, am I mad? I was never really mad, except upon occasions when my heart was touched. Then am I sane? I'm a writer. Therefore, no, I am not sane. There is more to any man than you will ever know, and much more to me than you can ever imagine.
True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been, and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. Heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain. But once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture. A pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, just at midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I placed in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cleverly, how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern, cautiously. Oh, so cautiously, cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell full upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible for me to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And each morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed, suspected every night just at 12. I looked in upon him where he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. The watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before this night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening his door little by little, and he to not even dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. Perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness. The shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers, and I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on, steadily, steadily. I had my head in, and was about to undo the lantern, when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. In the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in his bed, watching just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches on the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, I felt it in my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo of the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he'd been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned to the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He'd been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He'd been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor," or "It is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he'd been trying to comfort himself with all of these suppositions, but he found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. It was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily. At length, a simple, dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from out the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open. Wide open. I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as the watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and stood still. I scarcely breathed. I had the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I've told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. But even yet I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder, I felt the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The noise would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for some minutes longer, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe to you the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, and the arms, and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the floor of the chamber, and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went up to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own and a dream. At length I led my visitors all over the house. I led them to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. I bade them search well. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my own perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale. With them gone, my head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still the men sat, still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. Continued, became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more quickly, with a heightened voice, and yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, and yet the noise increased. I rose and argued on trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor, to and fro, with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations. observations of the men, but the noise continually increased. I pressed the Oh God, what could I do? I foamed. I raved. I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated upon the boards. But the noise arose over all and continually increased. Louder, louder, louder. And still the man chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God! No, no. They heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder! 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 Villains! I shrieked! Dissemble no more! I admit the deed! Tear up the planks! Here! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart!
It is by no means an irrational fancy to say that in a future existence we shall look upon our present existence as a dream. For who can say what is real, what is imagined, what is believed of what is imagined, and so made real, experienced as real? Take this kiss upon the brow, and in parting from you now, this much let me avow. You were not wrong who deem that my days have been a dream. Yet if hope has flown away in a night or in a day, in a vision or in none, is it therefore the less gone? All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. I stand amid the roar of a surf-tormented shore, and I hold within my hand grains of the golden sand. How few, yet how they creep through my fingers to the deep. While I weep, while I weep. Oh God, can I not grasp them with a tighter clasp? Oh God, can I not save one from the pitiless wave? Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream? At length, having spoken one day in tears of the last sad change which must befall humanity, my wife thenceforward dwelt only upon this one sorrowful theme. She had seen that the finger of death was upon her bosom, but like the ephemeron, she had been made perfect in loveliness, only to die. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. In this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. She was a child, and I was a child in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love was like no other love, I and my Annabel Lee. With the love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud by night, chilling my Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, This was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind blew out of the clouds by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I see the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the side of the sea. You seek an estimate of my life, and from what I have said thus far, you have seen that I have none to give. I have been too deeply conscious of the mutability and evanescence of temporal things to be consistent in anything, to give any continuous effort to anything. My life has been whim, impulse, passion, a longing for solitude, a scorn of all things present, in an earnest desire for the future. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, true to your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into the darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortals ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice, Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady, perched upon my chamber door. Perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. Perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on this night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird upon his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on that placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore. To the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of never, never more. But the raven, still beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy into fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet violet lining, that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining, with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed by an unseen censer, swung by Sulphon, whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee. By these angels he hath sent thee respite, and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still of bird or devil. Where the tempter sent or where the tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still of bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, till the soul with soul laden, if within the distant Aidenn, it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. be that word or sign imparting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. But his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.